trader, crypto podcast.
G'day guys, Trader Cobb here. I've got an amazing guest with me today with Sheila Warren, head of the blockchain for the World Economic Forum. Thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Look, I just want us to get straight into what you're doing. We talk a lot in this show about blockchain, cryptocurrency, the block asset sort of space, the crypto asset environment. Now, I read one of your pieces talking about crypto in the space like the red pill in the Matrix. A very eye-opening aha type of moment. Now, of course, this leads into what I want to know, which is what you're so excited and interested about in this space. So at the moment, with what you're seeing and what you're working on, where do you think we're going, and what is really exciting you at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think there are a number of use cases I find really interesting. I think we all, any blockchain addict, as I call us, or enthusiast, has this moment where you're up at 2 a.m. and you have this idea and you think this could apply, blockchain could solve this problem. You know, for me, that moment was actually in thinking about criminal justice. So it's something I'm very passionate about, especially in the United States, and how there are problems in the system, the criminal justice system, which are kind of well documented and known at this point. So one example I confess I just watched People vs. OJ the night before, which I think led to this dream, but is the idea that what if we could actually RFID evidence? Everything from rape kits that go missing, or DNA evidence that gets lost or degraded over time. What if we could actually have a tracking system on chain that would be public and would enable us to hold our system accountable? So it was interesting to think about that application. And so anything that's in this space of human rights and justice and liberty, like those are things that really, really keep me excited and awake and engaged in this space.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And look, I love that side of it too, because I'm a trader, I'm an investor, I come from those backgrounds, but I'm also a human being. I've got two wonderful young children, so anything that can bring the world forward, make it better, safer, less hackable, and make the world a better place. I know it sounds quite idealistic, but let's be honest, we're human beings, we control what we do. It's really, really exciting in that space. I mean, that criminal justice side of things, I can understand the practicality of that. In other areas, like for example, in Australia, where one of my good friends actually working on a project where they have voting on the blockchain, which is brilliant because it's a cheaper democratic process. Quickly you can do it, not just for, it can be within communities, within countries, but it's also something that can't be played with, it can't be rigged, it can't be hacked, it can't be changed. So it is what it is. So it's a wonderful application using the blockchain for this. You've talked about the criminal justice side of things. What other areas are you seeing at the moment that also excite? Because there are so many, as you know, right, you said 2 a.m. in the morning, wake up and boom, away you go. That happens all the time, right? It happens all the time. And I want to encourage people to stop looking at the Blockfolio side of things and start thinking creatively. And someone like you, obviously you've done a lot of that thinking and you're at the forefront of some amazing ideas. So aside from the first one, where else are you seeing the space at the moment?
Well, I'd love to just back up for a second and talk about voting, because it's something I address in my talk.
Ah, cool.
And I tend to be slightly more concerned about the voting application, to be really honest. In part because I think that democracy and voting are so essential to our society. And to me, invalidation of election, or the threat of that, or the perception that an election result is invalid, is something that is extremely damaging to a society.
Absolutely.
To functioning government. And we're seeing this around the world in many countries, some of which I will not name, but it's problematic.
Yes.
And so I think that what I said in my talk is it's really important to understand the context we're designing for. And I think in the West, in which I include Australia, we think a lot about elections as sort of these relatively safe, contained environments where we're trying to realize efficiencies. We're really trying to prevent ballot stuffing, right? Like miscounting ballot stuffing. That is a great use case. But an election protocol that we're kind of thinking about as universally solving some of these problems does not address what I call the coercion problem. So yes, you may be able to log that I, using my biometrics, voted a certain way for a certain candidate, but what you don't see is the system behind me that was threatening my family or my own daughters. I have two.
Very one-dimensional.
That's right, and so you're not seeing the fact that my entire vote was coerced. So yeah, you can log that I voted that way, and we can ask you, that's absolutely true. But it gets back to this problem that I call the garbage in, garbage forever problem. If you're putting in garbage data, and a coerced vote is garbage data, and you're tracking that, all you're doing is lending credence and credibility to a problematic process in the first place. So this is part of what we focus on in the center at where I work in San Francisco. And the forum set up the center in part to address this context, these contextual problems, and to encourage a policymaking process that can bake in ethics and values and think a lot about inclusion. Like, who are we not having in the conversation? So if we're building a pilot in voting, for example, that is localized in a very safe community, right, we should be very honest about the boundaries on what we're building, what we're actually building it for, and what it may not be applicable to. Because we're in such an early space in this technology, the danger is that successful pilots that were really meant to be narrow will then be rapidly scaled into environments where they have no business being.
So you're effectively saying that we've got an ecosystem, it's an environment where we don't have all the species yet. We're trying to create those species. Let's make sure the species that we create are correct. And you're working on the World Economic Forum. I mean, you're working in a very high-tech, high-inclusion space. Is that influencing where you're taking your views and your understanding of technology and the ecosystem that you're trying to create? Does it influence your views on the whole space?
You know what's interesting is I'm very new to the forums. I've only been there since October.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
That's super cool. That's really cool.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Big challenge, lots of fun.
I'm sure.
My background, I actually was in the nonprofit space for over a decade prior to this. And I did a lot of work in civic tech.
Yep.
So I think a lot about inclusion models. How do you do deployment in parts of the world that don't have access to infrastructure? Like things like this are what I spent a lot of my time thinking about. And prior to that, I represented a lot of philanthropists, including in Silicon Valley, organizations that were focused on social progress, civil rights, human rights. So that's what I bring to the table, and I think I bring that far more than anything about my current context because it's so new.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's fantastic having you in the space, and I mean, look, from this point of view, from my side, I think that there's amazing technology going on. We all know that.
Yeah.
I just like to speak to people not just on the let's make money side of things. I think that what's really entertaining and what's really interesting to me, it's kind of like what the internet did. I mean, I know we always talk about it, and it is a very close association. It's a good example, really, because it's fresh still.
Yes.
They've got similarities, but they're also very, very different. But we also know that with the internet, there were some bad things and good things. We've got the same opportunities here to bring the space up in a correct way and nurture it. Now, we do know that without a sense of regulation, which we're working on, and it's sort of starting to be spoken of at the right places, we may actually be able to create that ecosystem and environment that we look to have to create a truly inclusive, open and non-biased environment, which imagine having a world like that. Well, let's stop imagining, let's start creating. So
that's certainly the goal.
It's been absolutely wonderful having you on the show. I really appreciate it. If people want to find out more about your projects, what you do, where to find you, how would they do that?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Sheila_Warren. That's an easy way. We also have a website at the center. So it's the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's pretty easy to find. If you just put no search engine, Economic Forum, San Francisco will come up. And we're slowly beginning to populate those pages with some examples of the content we're producing, our methodology. We're trying to be public about our failures, like things that didn't go the way we expected. We think we can do that in a way that others may be challenged to do. And I think that's a really important part of what we're bringing to the table too.
Well, I think it's absolutely fantastic what you're doing. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for spending time on the Trader Cobb Crypto Show. And I'd love to speak to you again in the future when you have a bit more time.
Thank you as well.
Thanks
so
very much, Sheila. Lovely to meet
pleasure.
you. Thanks.
Trader Crypto Pod.